Today I am headed back to my home poker room and Las Colinas TCH Social, but you guys, I have so much to update you on. We are now in August, which is actually insane, and I never even really got to actually let you guys know how the World Series of Poker went for me. Long story short, I got 16th place in the $1,500 monster stack for $57,000. Was by far the highlight of my summer and my career. I got to play next to Joe Cata and play on the feature final 2 tables of a bracelet event, and I was 15 people away from $1.1 million. It was pretty surreal. If you guys want to see the entire thing, the whole journey and how it took place and all the emotions I felt and everything, please check out my second channel, Ashley Frank Vlogs. There you'll find my entire recap of every single week that I played there at the World Series of Poker. I headed straight from there to Durant, where I played some ring events, and now I'm just home for a little bit, of course doing my Lone Butte meetup game on August 10th, but after that I'm gonna be home and just play a lot of cash games. So today I'm headed to Las Colinas to play some 1-2 300 max buy-in. The 1-2 game has been great lately, and the other day I played, didn't vlog, made about $700, so let's continue that trend today. I'll see you guys at Las Colinas. Also, side note, I've been playing so many tournaments last year. I really feel more like a tournament player than a cash player, and I feel a bit rusty at cash, so hopefully I can shake a little bit of that off today and play well. And one of the very first hands we get involved with, there's a limp in early position, and then I look down at ace-jack offsuit in middle position. We're definitely going to raise and try to isolate, so I make it $15. The player to my left calls, the small blind calls, and the original limper calls, so we are going to go 4 ways to a flop. Sadly, my ISO raise did not work. However, we get a very favorable flop of Jack 7-7 Rainbow. They check it over to me, and on this very static board texture, we don't need to bet very big to get the job done. It's going to be very hard for my opponents to have a very strong hand on this board, unless of course they flopped trip 7s, and the strongest jack they should have in this spot is King Jack. So when we're looking at our entire range, this is going to be a board I'm going to continue barreling with even hands like King Queen offsuit, Ace Queen, Ace King, so I am going to have a fair amount of semi-bluffs on this board, but we can put so much pressure on our opponents if we didn't have a hand. However, we actually flopped a very strong hand, so we're gonna bet $20. Only the original limper calls, so we're gonna go heads up to a turn, which is the 5 of spades, and the board is completely rainbow. I don't know much about my opponent, but I think at this point he has to have some type of Jack X combination unless he's getting sneaky with trip 7s. However, in this player pool, they tend to raise when they make strong hands like that, so I'm not entirely worried he has a 7 in this spot. We want to keep all of his Jack X in, and if somehow he has a hand like pocket 8s or 9s that he decided to limp call pre-flop, we want to keep those hands in. So I bet $40. My opponent makes the call yet again, so at this point I think my opponent has a hand exactly like King Jack, possibly Queen Jack, maybe even Jack 10. So we head to a river card, which is the 4 of diamonds. My opponent checks yet again. We have to assume we have the best hand, we have our best jack we can possibly show up with, and we're hoping that we can get called by worse. I don't want to bet too big and get him to fold a jack, so I land on a bet size of $50. My opponent pretty much snap calls. I show my hand and he flips over King Jack, so we were right. I'm not sure if we could have got a ton more out of my opponent. Maybe I could have gone for a bet of 60 or 70, but he kind of side called knowing he was probably beat, but of course didn't want to fold his hand. So we were able to get a lot of value when our opponent flops a second best hand, and we're off to a good start. In this hand, there's a raise from early position and 1 caller. I look down at King 10 of diamonds in the cutoff, and this is a spot where I normally put in a 3-bet, having a suited Broadway hand, but this time I elected to call. We go 4 ways to a flop of 9-9-5 Rainbow. The flop checks around, and the turn is the 10 of clubs, so now we have top pair King Kicker. The small blind leads for $15, the player to my right calls, and I make the call. The river is the Queen of spades. The small blind leads again for $20, and then the player on my right min raises to $40. I don't think I can ever be good in this spot given this action. The queen peeling off on the river helps me get away as well, so I make the fold. The small blind calls the 40, and then they both flip over 9-3 suited. So I get a nice taste of regret of not 3-betting pre-flop, as my opponents both flop trips with 9-3, and it was good to note that my opponent on my right raised in early position with 9-3 suited. That'll definitely give me some info that we can use later in the session. In this hand, we get ourselves into a pickle where there's a limped pot and I complete in the small blind with 9-4 of spades. Normally I just toss my cards in, but I decided to peel, see if we can flop something decent, and we do as the flop comes 10-9-4 rainbow. I lead for $10. The big blind calls and then the low jack raises to 30. We flop bottom 2 pair, we're not going anywhere, I make the call. At this point, the opponent that I'm playing against, he seems somewhat competent, he also seems a bit capable, so he could even be doing this with a hand like Queen Jack, for example. Some of his value hands they're gonna do this is a hand like maybe Ace 10, King 10, and of course all of his sets and 2 pairs, so a hand like 10-9. We head to a turn card, which is the Queen of Hearts bringing in a heart draw. I check it over to him and now he bets $40. My opponent is trying to tell a story. Like I said, if he was semi-bluffing with a hand like Queen Jack, he just paired up. I'm also now losing to more 2 pairs like Queen 10. But again, having 2 pair, not entirely sure what my opponent has at this point, I make the call. The river is a pretty terrible card. It is the King of Hearts, so now we're losing to pretty much everything. I check and then my opponent goes all in for around $100 as he started the hand with a little less than 2. I'm losing to literally everything now. I'm even losing to heart flush at this point, and any jack makes it straight, and I'm losing to all better 2 pairs. So unfortunately, with this exact hand, I think I have to let it go. Pretty annoyed that I flopped 2 pair and then have to fold to this run out. But we're gonna shake this one off and move on to the next hand. After that hand, we gotta top up $100, so now we're in for $400. In this hand, I put on the $5 straddle, and there are 2 callers of the $5, and then it's on me, and I look down at King 3 offsuit. We're gonna check this one. We head to a flop 3 ways of King King 5 rainbow. So we flop ourselves trips in this straddled pot. Checks over to a very active, aggressive opponent, and he bets $15. Against this particular opponent, there's no point in raising. We can't get called by much unless it has a speed, and we want to keep all of his bluffs in, so I call and we head to a turn card. The turn is a Jack of Hearts. I check it over to him again and he bets $40. Very happy to see him continue barreling here as we have trips, so I call and we head to a river card, which is the 3 of Hearts, so now we have a full house. There is a possibility he was betting with a hand like King 8, King 7, King 6, King 10, etc. We have a lot of his King X beat. While I could check to him, I don't want this one to check through. Our hand is way too good. If he has a strong King X, then he'll probably put in a raise. If he has something decent, like maybe a 5 or a Jack, he might put in a hero call, so I bet $50. But he probably didn't have much as he lets his hand go fairly quickly and we pick up the pot. Maybe against this particular opponent I could have considered checking and seeing if he would fire again, but it's unlikely that he would go for the triple barrel bluff when I've called 2 streets already. So we pick up a very nice pot and let's move on to the next one. In this hand, there's a rare instance where it folds all the way around to the button and he raises to $5. I'm next to act in the small blind and look down at pocket kings. I raise to $20. The button calls and so we go heads up to a flop of Queen Jack 6 with all spades. I haven't double checked my suits yet, but I'm pretty sure I had the King of Spades, which is really nice. So on this type of monotone texture, we're either going to be betting a little bit on the bigger side or we're going to check. I'm going to be checking a lot of my hands out of position to the button in this spot, so I think checking, especially holding the King of Spades in my hand, is fine. When I check to my opponent, he can start betting with a lot of hands and putting pressure on a ton of my range, even hands that I have like Ace 8 of Hearts, for example, some suited kings that I might 3-bet pre-flop. A lot of my Ace X just have to fold, but my opponent is a little bit on the tighter side, so he does check behind. The turn is the 5 of clubs, so now we have to start putting money in this pot. We have an overpair and we're drawing to the second nut flush. I bet $25. My opponent puts in the call, so at this point I think his range consists of some Queen X and Jack X, or possibly a hand with a spade in them. So we head to a river, which is a very interesting card. It is the Ace of Diamonds. Unless my opponent was floating with exactly the Ace of Spades, he shouldn't really contain any Ace X in this spot unless he had, for example, a hand like Ace Jack, but I think our opponent is primarily capped to having a 1-pair type holding like a Queen or a Jack. So I'm gonna put out a little blocker bet. We can get called by worse, and it's hard for my opponent to put in a raise in this spot, especially given the player type. So I go for some thin value / a blocker bet and I make it $15. My opponent makes the call, we show our kings, and we are good. So we got a nice little extra bit of value on the river, which is something I've been trying to be better at lately, is going for some thin value when you know your hand is likely best. So now after that hand, our stack is up to $443, and remember, we're in for 400 because I topped up another 100. So finally, we're trending in the right direction. Alright, and now on to one of the most interesting hands I played for the night. There's a couple limps in front of me, and I'm on the button with Queen 9 offsuit. This hand is kind of trashy. I don't even think it's good to raise here and take aggression, even being on the button. I think it's better to just limp and see a flop if we're going to play this one. We go multi-way to a flop of Queen 7-4 rainbow. My opponent to my right bets $10. I make the call and the big blind comes along as well, so we go 3 ways to a turn card, which is bingo, the 9 of spades, giving us top 2 pair. And now my opponent in the cutoff bets $10. We need to raise for value. We can get called by a lot of his queen X like king queen, queen jack, etc. So I raise to $30. The big blind folds, and now it's back on the cutoff. He thinks for a little bit and then puts in a raise to $80. When he re-raises me on the turn, he's repping a very narrow range. And this board is completely rainbow, so it's so hard for my opponent to have bluffs or semi-bluffs, like for example, a backdoor flush draw. And this particular opponent specifically has pretty much played very fit or fold. He's one of those players who just doesn't bluff, likes to be very honest, and when he puts money in and puts raises in, this guy has it. So although it's very hard for him to have me beat unless he has exactly pocket 7s or pocket 4s, it's still a little bit alarming coming from this opponent. So the hands I think he's raising for value in this spot are pocket 7s, pocket 4s, and ace queen. I don't even think he does this with king queen, and it's very hard for him to have queen 9, the same hand as me, because I block that. And with how tight my opponent is, I'm not even sure he does this with a worse 2 pair than mine. So although we have a very strong hand, our opponent is repping a very narrow range, we're going to put in the call and proceed with caution. We head to a river card, which is probably one of the worst cards I could see. It is the ace of diamonds. And now my opponent goes all in for $110. And I normally don't take a ton of time on pretty much any spot in poker. I'm not usually a tanker, but this one sent me into the tank.
Ace is actually really bad.
So as you can hear me start talking out loud, which I also don't do a lot, I just felt like there's no way I'm good here, considering the player type and the runouts. My opponent either has a set or ace queen. I feel like it's a very narrow range and my hand is very, very strong as we're not losing to much. But again, it's very important to understand the players that you're playing against. And sometimes when an opponent takes this specific line, they only have hands that have you beat.
Just always beat, right? Oh!
So as you could hear, I am agonizing. I don't want to fold, but at the same time, I know I just have to be beat in this spot. So I let it go and my opponent flashes me ace queen. I'm very proud of my fold. A lot of people would just flick in a side call, and sure, against a lot of opponents, yes, you just have to put in the call here and hope that you're good. But against this specific opponent, it's very likely that we are just beat. So I'm thankful I saved $110 on the river. In this hand, we get a tad bit unlucky where I raise king 10 of clubs under the gun 2. The button, who's been involved a little bit but not too active, he puts in the 3-bet to $45. It folds back around to me, and because he just made it a standard 3x, he's giving me a decent price to call, and against this specific opponent, I think I have more than enough equity to continue here, especially against his range, so I make the call. We go 3 ways to a flop of 4, 6, 10 with 1 club, so we flop a very nice hand having a pair of 10s with a king kicker. We're not going to do anything on this board, being out of position, so I check it over to the pre-flop aggressor. He then bets $35. There's nothing to do here other than make the call, so we head to a turn card, which is the jack of diamonds, bringing in a diamond flush draw. We're going to check it over to him yet again, and my opponent checks back. When my opponent checks back, he's very capped to a 1-pair type holding or a hand that he just wants to give up with, so I have to assume my hand is likely good. We head to a river card, which is an offsuit 8, and now I check it over to my opponent yet again. We have a very nice hand, and we can get him to start bluffing with hands like ace queen or ace king, and my opponent checks back and says the words we don't want to hear. He says, "I have a 10. As soon as he said that, I knew it was going to be ace 10, and sadly, we get out-pipped here in a little bit unlucky of a situation. But against this particular opponent, I think we could have won the hand without making a pair, so I think we could have navigated and took this pot away from my opponent post-flop. Unfortunately, we just both happened to flop a hand, and his was 1 pip better. In this hand, we get away fairly cheaply where there is a straddle to $5. The player in the cutoff, my direct right, puts in the limp. I'm on the button and look down at pocket tens, a very, very nice hand to pick up on the button. I raise to $20. It folds around to the straddler and now he puts in the min raise to 40. I had seen him do this another time, and when he did this, he had pocket aces. I'm not saying he always has to have a strong hand when he does this, however, I don't think he's balancing this with doing it with worse or weak hands, so I think in this spot he just has another monster hand. Then the player in the cutoff, the original limper, rips all in for $200. It's a little bit annoying, but I have to fold my tens. They're likely never good given this action. Sure enough, the straddler calls the all in, and the straddler has pocket kings and the original limper has ace king. They run it twice and magically the ace king wins on both boards, hits an ace on both. So luckily I got out of there unscathed. In this hand, there's a straddle to $5 and a limp from a player on my right who plays pretty much any two cards. I raised to $20 with Jack 10 of diamonds, such a beautiful hand. The straddler and limper call, so we're gonna go 3 ways to a flop of queen, 5, deuce with 2 diamonds, so we flop 3 to a straight and 4 to a flush. On this queen high 2 diamond board, we're gonna bet a little bit bigger, so I bet $35. Only the loose cannon to my right makes the call, so we head to a turn card, which is the 10 of spades, so now we have a pair and a flush draw. He checks it over to me, and I think now that we've made a pair, we can keep all of his worst hands in, like 5x combinations. If he has a queen, we don't value own ourselves, and we are still drawing to our jack high flush, so I check back. Although I think we can go either way between betting for value and checking. The river is an offsuit 3, and now my opponent bets $55. Kinda sucks that we block diamonds in this spot, so it's less likely he has a missed flush. Sure, some of the time he's just gonna have a queen in this spot, but I think our hand against this particular opponent is a little bit too good to make the fold, so I toss in the call, and he shows us queen 7 offsuit, so we still are struggling, not getting much going. In this hand, there's a couple limps for $2, and then I'm on the button and look down at king 10 offsuit. Last time, we didn't raise the queen 9 off, but this time, having the king 10 off, I decided to go for the raise, and I make it $15. Only the lady 2 to my right makes the call, so we are going to go heads up to a flop of queen 8, 5 with 2 hearts. She checks it over to me, and on this queen high board, I'm gonna bet a little bit on the bigger side, so I bet $15. She makes the call, and so now we head to a turn card, which is a great card for us. It's the ace of diamonds. She checks yet again. So now we pick up some equity with our gutter, we have range advantage. She shouldn't have any ace-x hands unless she has exactly ace 5 or ace 8, and the only combos she should really have of that are ace 8 of spades and ace 8 of clubs. So her range really is capped to an 8, a 5, a queen, or some small pocket pairs that she didn't want to fold on the flop. So we're gonna bet $45, knowing she's probably gonna have to fold a ton of hands. Sure enough, she lets it go, so we get the king high through and finally win a pot. In this hand, I put the $5 straddle on, and there are 3 limpers to my right. I look down at king jack offsuit. This is a great hand to put in a raise and try to take this one down pre-flop. We block really strong hands, they've limped, so they can't have very strong hands themselves, and this is a hand that we don't really want to play out of position multi-way, especially being the offsuit variety. So we're gonna make it obnoxiously big, hope to try to get them to fold and polarize a little bit, so I raise to $35. They all fold, so we get to pick up about $20 of dead money without seeing the flop. In this hand, the loose cannon to my right, who's been pretty aggressive, the one who raised with 9-3 suited earlier on in the session, he raised to $10. I'm a few seats over and look down at king queen offsuit. I'm gonna put in a 3-bet and isolate this guy, try to play a pot in position against him, so I make it $30. We go heads up to a queen high flop, he checks, I bet, he folds, and we take it down in this nice little 3-bet pot. Finally feels like we are picking up some steam in this session. In this hand, under the gun raises to $10. The lady next to act makes the call, the cutoff calls, and then I look down at pocket aces in the small blind. Finally, we get to look down at the best hand in poker. I should be raising pretty large here, being out of position, but at the same time, I don't want them to fold. I need to get unstuck in this game and try to win some chips, so I make it $45. Well, I quickly learned my lesson as they all call, so we go 4 ways to a flop. I have pocket aces out of position, not the best situation in the world. However, we get a very nice flop of King 7-3 with 2 diamonds, so this is a very, very nice board for us. Our opponents are going to continue with all of their King X hands and their flush draws, so being out of position, I should be betting a little bit on the smaller side, and with the pot being what it is, I think a size of 65 is pretty nice. It's about a third to 40% pot. They all make the fold, but we finally pick up a very, very nice pot, and we are on to play the last hand of the session and the biggest pot I play for the night. Alright everybody, you know what time it is. It's time to buckle up, and we are about to play the biggest pot of the night, and it happens to be one of my last hands. We are actually in a 6-way limped pot. I limped the small blind with pocket deuces. The flop peels off deuce 3-4 with 2 clubs, so we flop bottom set on the sweat and dynamic board. It checks over to the lady in front of me, and she puts out a bet of $15. The player to my right calls, and now it's on me. Definitely gonna put in a raise. We have a good hand. We have a hand that can get called by so many different combinations. All over pairs, straight draw plus flush draw type hands, and we have a set. We're not gonna go anywhere, so I make it $50. The lady and the other player make the call, so now we're headed to a turn, which is one of the safest cards I could see. It's the Jack of Spades. Now this pot is getting pretty big. Now I gotta start betting a little bit bigger to charge those flush draws and straight draws. I bet $100. Effective stacks in this hand between the lady and I are about $460. So at this point, she looks at her stack, sees my bet amount, and then says, I'll just go all in. The player to my right folds, and now it's on me. I'm pretty sure I'm beat at this point, but we have outs to improve. I'm not sure what hands she could be doing this with that are worse. Maybe a hand like Ace Jack of Clubs. I can find some hands that are possibly worse than ours, but we have a set. I'm not going anywhere. Let's get all the money in and see what happens. I put in the call. The dealer rolls off another jack on the river, and at this point, I'm very confident I have the best hand. She flips over Ace 5 of hearts, and so I definitely needed some help there on the river, and I got it in this $1,000 pot. And so now we go from being stuck and buried almost the entire session to now booking a nice profit to end this session. I was just about to rack up before this hand happened, so I'm very glad I played it. I played for almost 4.5 hours. I was in for a total of $600 and out for $994 for a profit of $394. And if you're wondering what I use to track all of my stats, I use Poker Analytics. They have endless reports and filters, so you can see exactly where you're at with any type of stats you want to look at. Make sure you check out Poker Analytics. The link will be below.
Wow, what a grind tonight was. This was definitely one of those sessions where it felt like nothing went right, especially after we won that hand with the pocket kings earlier on. Everything just went south and either had second best or just couldn't really get anything going, and whiffed a lot of flops with small pocket pairs and stuff like that. But some pretty frustrating spots, and then I was getting a little bit frustrated. I had to kind of check myself a little bit, and it doesn't feel good to be in for 2 buy-ins in a 1-2 game, especially when the play is just pretty soft. So it's just hard sometimes, I think, to find a balance between being aggressive and overly aggressive and kind of taming it back a little bit. So just trying to experiment with that, and that queen 9 offhand was pretty unfortunate. However, very proud of myself for not just flicking in a call there and just hoping to be good. So, being thoughtful about the players you're playing against is very important. So finally flop a set, but of course she just has to have the straight. Thankfully, the poker gods felt sorry for me or something, because they give us another jack on the river to boat up there. Such a sweet spot, especially when I was right about to leave, so couldn't have asked for a better outcome there. Anyway, I hope you guys learned something this vlog, and we were in the game for $600, cashed out with $994, somehow squeaking out a nice profit of $394. So if you guys enjoyed the vlog, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started. It's only up from here. We'll see you guys next time for another cash game session.